The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden hue over the suburban neighborhood of Maplewood. The rhythmic sound of cicadas filled the air as the late afternoon sun began its descent, signaling the end of yet another ordinary day. David Thompson, a dedicated mechanic known for his kind heart and willingness to help others, was winding down his day at his small, family-run auto shop, Thompson's Garage. Little did he know, today would be anything but ordinary. As David wiped his hands on a rag, he glanced at the clock. It was nearly 5 o'clock, and the shop had been bustling with customers all day. David loved his job. It was more than just a means to an end. He took pride in every car he fixed, knowing that he was helping people get back on the road. But today, he felt a sense of restlessness as he contemplated the mundane routine ahead of him. "Just one more customer, and then I'm out of here," he muttered to himself as he slid into his grease-stained work shirt. His phone buzzed on the counter, breaking him out of his thoughts. It was a message from his best friend, Carlos, inviting him to join a local barbecue that evening. David smiled, the thought of good food and camaraderie lifting his spirits. With a contented sigh, he stepped outside, locking the shop door behind him. The warm breeze brushed against his face, and he took a moment to appreciate the vibrant colors of the setting sun. He walked towards his pickup truck, ready to head home when he noticed a commotion down the street. Setting the scene, an unexpected sight. At the edge of the road, a young woman was kneeling beside her car, surrounded by a few scattered tools and a visibly flat tire. Her frustration was palpable as she tugged on the stubborn tire iron, but it wouldn't budge. David's instinct to help kicked in. He knew what it felt like to be in a tough spot, and he couldn't ignore someone in need. He approached cautiously, observing her struggle. She had curly hair pulled into a messy bun, and her face showed a mix of determination and despair. "Hey there, do you need a hand?" he called out, his voice carrying over the distance. Startled, she looked up, her expression shifting from frustration to relief. "Oh, thank goodness. Yes, please. I can't seem to get this tire off," she admitted, brushing a few strands of hair from her face, her eyes reflecting both hope and worry. "Don't worry. I've got you," David replied, stepping closer. "I'm David, by the way." "Sarah," she said, managing a smile despite her predicament. "I didn't think anyone would stop to help." The first connection. As David knelt beside her car, he could see the telltale signs of a tough day on her face. Her cheeks were flushed, likely from the heat, and her hands bore faint traces of grease and dirt. "What happened?" he asked while loosening the lug nuts with ease, his practiced hands working quickly. "I was on my way home from work when I hit a pothole and heard a loud pop. Now I'm stranded," Sarah explained, glancing nervously at the busy road. "I tried to call for roadside assistance, but they said it would be at least an hour." David nodded, his mind racing with memories of similar moments in his life when he had felt helpless. "No worries. We'll have you back on the road in no time," he reassured her. As he worked, they exchanged small talk, casual stories about their lives, revealing bits and pieces about who they were. Sarah worked as a graphic designer and had just moved to Maplewood a few months ago. David found himself drawn to her enthusiasm as she talked about her passion for art and the local community projects she was involved in. "Maplewood has such a quaint charm, don't you think?" she said, her eyes sparkling as she spoke. "I love how everyone seems to know each other. It's refreshing." David couldn't help but smile. "It really is. People here look out for one another," he replied, tightening the last lug nut with a satisfying click. All done. A moment of gratitude. Sarah stood up and dusted her hands on her jeans, looking at the now reattached tire with gratitude. "Thank you so much. I don't know what I would have done without you," she exclaimed, her smile brightening her face. "Seriously, you're a lifesaver." "Just doing what I can," David shrugged, feeling a warm sense of fulfillment wash over him. He knew this was just a small act of kindness, but in that moment, it felt monumental. Before they parted ways, Sarah rummaged through her bag and pulled out a small business card. "Here, this is my design studio's card. If you ever need anything designed, just let me know." "I'd love to return the favor," she offered, her eyes hopeful. David took the card, glancing at it briefly before tucking it into his pocket. "I appreciate it, Sarah. I'll keep it in mind." With a wave, they said their goodbyes, and as David walked back to his truck, he felt a lightness in his step. It had been a long day, but helping Sarah had rekindled his spirits. He turned to look back one last time, catching a glimpse of her getting into her car and driving off with a relieved smile on her face. A glimpse of trouble ahead. As he drove home, the encounter replayed in his mind. The warmth of connection, the feeling of helping someone in need. It all felt good. But as he neared his house, a subtle unease crept in. Something about the way Sarah had responded to that phone call earlier lingered in his thoughts. Was there more to her story than she had let on? He shook his head, dismissing the notion. It wasn't his place to speculate. He had done a good deed, and that was what mattered. However, little did David know that their seemingly simple encounter would have far-reaching implications, twisting their lives in ways they could never have imagined. As he pulled into his driveway, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a shadow over the neighborhood, hinting at the unexpected events that were about to unfold. He parked his truck and stepped out, ready to unwind and enjoy the evening. But in the back of his mind, Sarah's situation gnawed at him, planting seeds of curiosity and concern. The evening air was cool and refreshing as David Thompson stepped into his house, leaving the day's events behind him. He tossed his work boots aside and headed to the kitchen, the familiar scent of leftover lasagna wafting through the air. His mother had left it for him to heat up, a reminder of her ongoing efforts to ensure he didn't go hungry while managing the garage. The warmth of her love wrapped around him like a cozy blanket. As he warmed up the meal, his mind wandered back to Sarah, the woman he had helped earlier. He couldn't shake the feeling that their encounter was more than just a chance meeting. There was something about her energy that captivated him. In the brief time they spent together, he felt a connection, a shared understanding that seemed rare in a world often filled with indifference. But as he sat down to eat, the comforting thoughts of their conversation were interrupted by a loud knock at the door. Startled, David looked up, glancing at the clock on the wall. It was nearly 9. Who could be visiting at this hour? He stood up, setting his fork down and wiping his mouth with a napkin, curiosity peaking within him. Setting the scene, an unexpected visitor. As he approached the door, the faint sounds of the night filtered in, crickets chirping and a distant dog barking. He opened the door cautiously, his heart racing a little. Standing there was a figure shrouded in darkness, but the glow of the streetlight illuminated a familiar face. It was Sarah. "Hey, I hope I'm not disturbing you," she said, her voice warm and inviting despite the late hour. "I wanted to thank you properly for helping me today." David was taken aback. Not at all. I wasn't expecting to see you," he replied, stepping aside to let her in. "Please, come in." Once inside, Sarah smiled as she took in his cozy living room, decorated with framed photographs of family and friends. "I really appreciate you coming to my rescue earlier. I've been trying to adjust to life in Maplewood, and today was just one of those days," she said, her tone reflecting the sincerity of her gratitude. "No problem at all. I'm just glad I could help," David said, feeling a rush of warmth at her presence. He felt a spark of excitement, a mix of nervousness and intrigue. The growing connection. As they settled into the living room, David offered her a seat on the plush couch, while he took the armchair opposite her. "Can I get you something to drink? Water, soda, coffee?" he asked, eager to make her comfortable. "A glass of water would be great, thanks," she replied, her eyes scanning the room. David couldn't help but notice how she seemed to light up the space with her energy. As he poured the water, they chatted easily about their day-to-day lives. David shared anecdotes about his work at the garage, how he loved tinkering with cars, and how he started the business with his father. Sarah, in turn, recounted her experiences as a graphic designer and the challenges of starting fresh in a new town. "So what brought you to Maplewood?" David asked, genuinely interested. "I was looking for a change, I guess," she said thoughtfully, her gaze drifting to the window as she spoke. "I wanted a quieter life, away from the chaos of the city. It's beautiful here, and I thought it would be a great place to settle down and explore my creativity." David nodded, understanding her desire for tranquility. Maplewood had a charm that often captivated newcomers, a tight-knit community that embraced those willing to become a part of it. The first glimpse of trouble. But just as their conversation flowed, David noticed a flicker of unease cross Sarah's face. "Is everything okay?" he asked, leaning forward with concern. She hesitated, biting her lip before answering. "I've just been feeling a bit overwhelmed lately. I thought moving here would solve everything, but some things from my past still haunt me." David's heart ached for her. He sensed there was more beneath the surface, but he respected her need for privacy. "If you ever want to talk about it, I'm here to listen," he offered gently, hoping to convey his support. "Thanks, David. That means a lot," Sarah said, her eyes glistening with gratitude. Their connection deepened as they continued to share stories, laughter, and moments of vulnerability. Time seemed to slip away unnoticed, and soon the sun had fully set, casting the room in a soft glow from the lamp in the corner. Just as David was about to suggest they watch a movie or something, a loud noise erupted outside, like the revving of an engine and the screeching of tires. Both of them turned toward the window, their expressions shifting from relaxed to alert. A shock that changes everything. David's heart raced as he peered outside. A sleek black SUV was parked suspiciously across the street, its headlights illuminating the front of his house. The vehicle looked out of place, almost ominous in the quiet neighborhood. He felt a chill run down his spine. "Do you know who that is?" Sarah asked, her voice low and slightly shaky. "I have no idea," David replied, his instincts telling him that something was off. He opened the front door cautiously and stepped outside, Sarah following closely behind. As they approached the sidewalk, the SUV's engine roared to life, and the driver's door swung open. A tall figure stepped out, silhouetted against the headlights. David's heart sank as he recognized the man. It was Jake, a local real estate agent known for his questionable ethics and shady dealings. Jake was infamous in town for his dismissive attitude towards anyone he deemed beneath him, and David had heard countless stories about his arrogance. "Hey, what's going on?" David called out, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Just doing some business," Jake replied, his voice dripping with sarcasm. He glanced at Sarah, and then back at David, a smirk playing on his lips. "You really think you can just help anyone you want, huh? What a hero." David's blood boiled at Jake's condescending tone. "What do you want, Jake?" he asked firmly, stepping closer. Jake shrugged, the smirk still plastered on his face. "Just wanted to see who my clients are spending their time with. You know how it is. Word travels fast in this town." The turning point. As tension thickened in the air, Sarah shifted uncomfortably beside David, her expression shifting from confusion to concern. "What's going on here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake took a step toward her, his gaze assessing. "Just a little friendly reminder that not everyone is who they seem. David here might be a nice guy, but he's not exactly the type to be mingling with folks like you." Before David could respond, Sarah spoke up, her voice steady and unwavering. "I'm not sure what you mean by that, but David helped me when I was in need. There's nothing wrong with lending a hand." Jake's expression darkened, and he stepped back, visibly irritated. "You don't know him like I do, sweetheart. He's just a mechanic. You might want to be careful about who you associate with." David felt anger rising within him. How dare Jake belittle Sarah like that? "Enough, Jake. You have no right to speak to her that way," David declared, his voice stronger now. Jake chuckled darkly, a glint of menace in his eyes. Just remember, David, it's a small town. People talk. You don't want your reputation ruined over a little charity, do you? With that, he climbed back into the SUV, slamming the door behind him. The engine roared back to life as he sped off, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. Aftermath. The shock of reality. The silence that followed felt deafening. David turned to Sarah, who looked equally stunned and concerned. "I'm so sorry you had to witness that," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "Jake can be a real jerk." "Wow, that was intense," Sarah replied, her eyes wide. "What was his deal?" David took a deep breath, trying to shake off the encounter. "He's just a bully. He thinks he's above everyone else because of his job in real estate." But what he said, his voice trailed off, the weight of the moment settling heavily on his shoulders. "David, you're not just a mechanic. You're a good person, and you did something kind today. Don't let him get to you." Sarah encouraged, her voice reassuring. "I know, but it's frustrating. It feels like no matter what I do, people like him always try to tear you down," David replied, the frustration bubbling up again. As they stood there under the dim streetlight, both lost in thought, David realized this was only the beginning. The confrontation had opened a door he never expected, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the impact of Jake's words would linger. Little did they know, this incident was about to set off a chain reaction that would forever alter the course of their lives. In the days that followed Jake's unsettling encounter, David found himself unable to shake the nagging feeling of unease. The thrill of meeting Sarah faded, overshadowed by the harsh reality of the world they lived in. It was as if Jake's words echoed in his mind, a constant reminder of the fragility of perception and the societal barriers that still loomed large. Despite the weight of the previous evening, David resolved to focus on his work at the garage. Cars were his sanctuary, a place where he could lose himself in the rhythm of engines revving and tools clanking, free from the judgments and petty insults of the outside world. But even there, whispers of Jake's comments seeped in, muting the sound of the engines and dulling the shine of freshly polished hoods. Background: a community divided. The local newspaper had a new column titled Community Voices, where residents shared their thoughts and experiences. On a whim, David decided to submit an entry about his encounter with Jake, detailing how a simple act of kindness had turned into an ugly confrontation. He hoped it would spark some discussion about the need for empathy and understanding in their small town. To his surprise, the column gained traction. Comments flooded in, with people sharing their own stories of discrimination and support, many echoing similar experiences of being judged based on appearance or occupation. It seemed that the incident struck a chord with the community, igniting a long-dormant conversation about respect and dignity. But while many rallied around David, not everyone was pleased. Jake's influence in town was substantial, and he was known to retaliate against anyone who crossed him. David felt the weight of his decision. He had opened a Pandora's box that he could not close. Rising action. The first signs of trouble. One evening, while David was finishing up work at the garage, he noticed a sleek black SUV parked across the street. His heart sank. Could it be Jake? David watched from the window as a couple of men stepped out. They seemed to be surveying the garage, their expressions unreadable. When they caught sight of David, they walked over, their movements deliberate and menacing. "Are you David Thompson?" one of them asked, a hint of mockery in his tone. "Yeah, that's me. Can I help you?" David replied, trying to keep his voice steady. The man smirked. "We heard you've been running your mouth about Jake. You know that can have consequences, right?" David felt a chill run down his spine. "I didn't mean any harm. I just shared my story," he explained, unsure of how to diffuse the tension. "Stories have a way of spreading. You should watch your back," the man warned, before turning to leave. David stood frozen as they walked back to the SUV, feeling a mix of fear and anger boil within him. Climax. The turning point. The following days were filled with anxiety. David found himself looking over his shoulder everywhere he went. It was exhausting and suffocating, and he couldn't help but feel like he was caught in a web he didn't know how to escape. But amidst the turmoil, Sarah reached out, wanting to meet again. They decided to grab coffee at a local cafe, a place known for its quaint atmosphere and friendly baristas. As they sat together, Sarah shared her thoughts about their previous encounter and the community's response to David's story. "I think you've sparked something important here. People need to hear more about these issues," she said earnestly. "I appreciate that, but I didn't want it to escalate like this," David replied, feeling a pang of guilt. "I didn't think it would get ugly. Sometimes change requires us to take risks. We can't just sit by and let people like Jake keep getting away with their behavior," she insisted, her passion igniting a fire within him. Their conversation was cut short when the cafe door swung open, and in walked Jake, flanked by two of his friends. David's heart sank. The air in the cafe shifted, and he could feel the tension rise like steam from a boiling kettle. Jake spotted them immediately, his eyes narrowing as he approached. "Well, if it isn't the hero and his new friend," he sneered, the mockery evident in his voice. "Jake, we're just having coffee," David said, trying to keep his cool. "You think you're a big shot now because you got a few people riled up. You're nothing," Jake shot back, his voice rising. "David isn't nothing," Sarah interjected, her voice steady as she faced Jake. "He's standing up for what's right, something you wouldn't understand." Jake laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. "You really want to be careful about who you defend, sweetheart. This town is mine to control, and you're just playing with fire. Fallout. Consequences unfold." The confrontation escalated, drawing the attention of other customers in the cafe. David felt humiliated, exposed under the glare of judgmental eyes. He could feel their whispers clawing at his back, and he longed to escape the situation. But before he could respond, Jake leaned in closer, his voice low and threatening. "You think you're brave? I'll make you regret crossing me," he hissed, then turned and strutted out of the cafe with his friends, leaving behind a trail of tension. As David and Sarah sat in stunned silence, David's mind raced with the implications of what just happened. "I can't believe he just did that," he murmured, the weight of the confrontation sinking in. "He's trying to intimidate you, but you can't let him win," Sarah replied, her voice firm. "You have to stand your ground." David knew she was right, but the fear that coursed through him felt like an anchor dragging him down. What if he tries to retaliate? What if he does something to my business? He might try, but you have support. "You're not alone in this," she reassured him, placing her hand on his. The warmth of her touch provided a moment of comfort amidst the chaos. As they finished their coffee in silence, David contemplated the choices he had made. He had unintentionally ignited a battle that would require courage and resilience, but he also knew that backing down was not an option. Reflection. A community awakens. Days turned into weeks, and as David navigated the repercussions of his decision, something remarkable began to happen. People from the community started to rally around him. They offered support, sharing their own stories of overcoming adversity and confronting discrimination. The local newspaper published more articles highlighting David's experience, shining a light on the need for solidarity and compassion within Maplewood. Residents organized meetings to discuss ways to create a more inclusive community, a space where everyone felt valued regardless of their background. David began to see a shift in the atmosphere of the town, and he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The anger and intimidation from Jake began to feel less daunting in the face of the collective strength of the community. Yet, the shadow of Jake's threats loomed large, reminding David that the fight was far from over. The more he embraced his role as a voice for change, the more Jake retaliated, seeking to undermine David's efforts at every turn. David had become a symbol of resilience, but with that came the responsibility to continue standing up for those who felt marginalized. He was determined to fight for a better future, not just for himself, but for everyone in Maplewood. As David's relationship with Sarah deepened, they formed a partnership grounded in shared values and mutual respect. Together, they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, armed with the knowledge that they were not alone in this battle. As the weeks passed, the situation in Maplewood grew increasingly tense. While David reveled in the community's newfound support and engagement, Jake remained a looming threat, his anger manifesting in subtle yet alarming ways. Rumors swirled, and whispers filled the air with caution. David knew he had to confront Jake, not just for himself, but for everyone who felt trapped under his oppressive influence. Background: the threat looms. It was a bright Saturday morning when David decided to attend a community rally organized to raise awareness about discrimination and to support local businesses. The rally was scheduled in the town square, where banners adorned with messages of unity and resilience fluttered in the gentle breeze. David felt a swell of hope as he parked his car and joined the crowd of smiling faces, people he'd never met before, all eager to stand together in solidarity. The atmosphere was electric, and speeches from local leaders inspired David. He listened intently as they spoke of the importance of standing up against injustice and supporting one another. Yet, amid the uplifting energy, David couldn't shake the feeling of dread that gnawed at him. Jake's presence in town was an unspoken shadow, and he knew that the man wouldn't take David's stand lightly. Rising action. A dangerous confrontation. As the rally continued, David felt a surge of courage. This was his moment to speak out. He stepped forward, taking a microphone in hand, and the crowd quieted. "I want to share my story," he began, his voice steady yet vulnerable. "I helped a woman in need, and instead of gratitude, I faced humiliation and intimidation. But I refused to let fear dictate my actions. We must support each other and stand against those who wish to divide us." The crowd erupted in applause, and David felt a rush of adrenaline. For the first time in weeks, he felt free and powerful. But then, just as the energy reached its peak, a deep, mocking laugh echoed from the back of the crowd. David turned to see Jake standing there, flanked by his friends, a sinister grin plastered across his face. "Isn't this cute? A little rally for a nobody," Jake shouted, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You think this changes anything? You're just wasting your breath." The atmosphere shifted abruptly, and whispers of concern rippled through the crowd. David felt his heart race, a mix of fear and anger surging within him. He couldn't let Jake intimidate him. Not here, not now. "Jake, this isn't about you," David replied, forcing his voice to stay calm. "This is about community and support. You might think you can bully us, but we are stronger together." Jake took a step closer, the mockery in his eyes intensifying. "Stronger? Please. You're just a small-town mechanic with delusions of grandeur. You're playing with fire, my friend." Climax. The breaking point. In that moment, something within David snapped. He had been pushed around for too long, and he refused to be silent any longer. "You don't scare me, Jake. Your intimidation tactics may have worked before, but not anymore." His voice boomed through the square, and the crowd's energy shifted. People started to cheer, emboldened by David's bravery. But Jake wasn't finished. He surged forward, fueled by rage, and as he approached, David could see the anger radiating off him. "You think you're a hero. You'll regret this," he spat, and before David could react, Jake shoved him hard, sending him stumbling back. Gasps echoed through the crowd as people watched in disbelief. David quickly regained his footing, his heart racing, but he refused to back down. "I'm not afraid of you, Jake. You don't control this town, and you certainly don't control me." Just then, Sarah stepped forward, her eyes blazing with determination. "This isn't about fighting. It's about respect. You need to realize that you can't keep bullying people into submission." As if taken aback by her audacity, Jake hesitated for a moment, confusion flashing across his face. The crowd surged forward, rallying behind David and Sarah, creating a wall of support that pushed Jake back. Fallout: the consequences of courage. The rally quickly transformed into a unified front against Jake's tyranny. As he retreated, muttering threats under his breath, David felt an overwhelming wave of relief and empowerment wash over him. The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices echoing in the square, a chorus of unity and strength that drowned out Jake's disdain. But while the moment felt like a victory, David knew the battle was far from over. In the days that followed, tension hung in the air like a storm cloud. People whispered of retaliation, and rumors of Jake's possible plans to disrupt David's life began to circulate. David could feel the pressure mounting, and he worried about the safety of his friends, family, and the community that had rallied around him. He couldn't shake the feeling that Jake would strike back in a way that would leave scars. One evening, as David locked up the garage after a long day, he noticed a dark figure lurking outside. His heart raced as he approached, the weight of his fear heavy on his chest. But as he got closer, he recognized the silhouette. It was Sarah. "Hey, I thought you might still be here," she said, her smile easing his tension. "Just finishing up," David replied, grateful for her presence. "I've been worried. What if Jake tries to retaliate?" Sarah's expression turned serious. "We can't let fear control us. If he tries something, we'll face it together. This isn't just about you anymore. It's about all of us." Reflection: the community rallies. With Sarah by his side, David began to see the ripple effect of their confrontation. The community continued to discuss ways to strengthen their bond, hosting meetings where they brainstormed initiatives to promote inclusion and respect for all residents. During one of these gatherings, David shared his concerns about Jake's potential retaliation, and the community rallied around him. They decided to implement a neighborhood watch program, ensuring that everyone looked out for each other. The support poured in, and people volunteered to patrol the streets, keeping an eye on the neighborhood and reporting any suspicious activity. The sense of camaraderie was palpable, and David felt a renewed sense of hope for the future. However, as the program gained momentum, Jake's anger simmered just below the surface. He began to orchestrate small acts of sabotage against those who supported David, spreading rumors, vandalizing properties, and even threatening those who stood in his way. David felt the tension escalate as fear crept back into the hearts of some residents. Still, David refused to back down. He organized a town hall meeting to address the escalating situation and to remind everyone of the importance of unity and resilience. On the night of the meeting, David stood before the crowd, his heart pounding but his resolve unwavering. "We cannot let fear dictate our actions," he urged, his voice resonating through the hall. "We've come too far to let one person tear us apart. We stand for respect, dignity, and community, and together we are stronger than any individual who seeks to divide us." As David spoke, he could see the faces of his neighbors light up with determination. They had weathered the storm together, and they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. With Sarah at his side, he felt an unbreakable bond with the community, one forged through adversity and strengthened by their shared values. The meeting concluded with a renewed commitment to stand together against Jake's threats. David felt a sense of purpose wash over him. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for every person who had ever felt marginalized, ridiculed, or silenced. As they left the meeting, David felt a spark of hope ignite within him. The road ahead might be challenging, but with the support of his community and the courage they had all found together, he knew they would face it head-on. As the days turned into weeks, the tension between David and Jake reached a boiling point. The once peaceful town of Maplewood felt like a powder keg ready to explode. The community stood united, yet the underlying threat posed by Jake loomed larger than ever. David knew it was only a matter of time before Jake would try to reassert his dominance, and he couldn't shake the feeling that a confrontation was imminent. Background: the calm before the storm. It was a crisp autumn evening when David, Sarah, and a few other community members gathered at the local park to discuss their plans for the upcoming neighborhood watch event. The leaves crunched underfoot as they walked through the park, the air filled with the smell of bonfires and the sound of laughter from families enjoying the last warm days before winter set in. The camaraderie felt palpable as they brainstormed ideas for engaging the community and promoting their message of unity. "We should plan a family-friendly event," Sarah suggested, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "Maybe a barbecue or a fall festival. Something that brings everyone together and reminds them why we're standing up against bullying and discrimination." "Absolutely," David agreed. "We need to show Jake that his tactics won't work. We'll strengthen our community bonds and remind everyone that we're here for each other." As they discussed the details, David felt a sense of hope and determination. He believed that this event could be the turning point, a moment that would solidify their community's resolve against Jake's intimidation. Rising action. The event planning. Over the following weeks, the planning for the neighborhood event gained momentum. Word spread quickly, and soon volunteers from all corners of Maplewood stepped forward, eager to contribute their time and resources. Local businesses offered donations of food and supplies, and families signed up to help set up and clean up after the event. As the day of the festival approached, excitement filled the air. David could hardly contain his anticipation. This was their chance to showcase their unity and resilience, to show Jake and anyone else that Maplewood wouldn't back down in the face of adversity. However, behind the scenes, Jake was plotting his revenge. He felt humiliated by David's rise and the community's support for him. He had always thrived on fear and control, and now that power slipped through his fingers. Rumors began to circulate that he was planning something sinister to disrupt the event, and that fear gripped David's heart. David declared, "We're done letting you intimidate us. This is our community, and we won't be Boo Climax." The festival day. The day of the fall festival arrived, bright and sunny, with laughter and joy filling the park. David stood at the entrance, greeting families and handing out flyers about their community wash program. The atmosphere was electric. Children ran around with balloons, and the smell of grilled burgers wafted through the air. As David looked around, he felt a swell of pride for his community. They were banding together, putting aside their fears and creating an environment of support and love. But in the back of his mind, he could not shake the nagging feeling that Jake would not allow this event to pass without interference. Just as the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the park, a commotion erupted near the food tables. David rushed over to see a group of Jake's friends huddled around the grill, their laughter ringing with malice. David's heart sank as he realized they were up to no good. "What are you doing here?" David shouted, anger rising in his chest. Jake stepped forward, a smirk plastered on his face. "Just making sure the food is up to standards. Wouldn't want anyone getting sick, right?" His friends laughed, and David's blood boiled. "This is a community event. You're not welcome here, Jake. Leave now, before this escalates." Jake's smile faded, replaced by a dangerous glare. "You think you can push me out of my own town? This isn't over, David. You've made a mistake." Fallout, confrontation, and revelation. As Jake turned to leave, David felt a surge of courage. "You're not going to ruin this for us. We're not afraid of you anymore," he shouted after him. Jake paused, a moment of contemplation passing between them, before he strode away with his friends. The tension hung thick in the air, and David could see fear in some of the faces around him. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. The festival continued, but an undercurrent of anxiety had seeped in. David glanced at Sarah, who stood beside him, concern etched on her face. "What if he comes back?" she asked, her voice low. "He won't," David replied, though he could feel doubt creeping into his mind. "We have to keep the faith. We've come too far to let him ruin this." As the evening wore on, the festival regained its festive spirit. People danced, children played games, and laughter echoed in the park. Yet David couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing. Just as he began to relax, a loud crash interrupted the festivities, sending everyone into a state of panic. David sprinted toward the sound, his heart pounding. He skidded to a halt at the sight before him. A table had been overturned, and Jake's friends stood laughing as they watched the chaos unfold. They had deliberately knocked over the table laden with food and decorations, causing chaos among the attendees. "Stop it! What's wrong with you?" David yelled, his voice breaking through the noise. Jake's friends sneered at him, relishing the disruption they had caused. "Just having a little fun, David. You wanted a party, didn't you?" one of them shouted. Reflection. The aftermath. The laughter of Jake's friends was abruptly cut off as a wave of the crowd surged forward, united in their anger. "This is unacceptable," shouted one woman, her fists clenched. "We're done letting you bully us." With newfound determination, the community rallied around David, confronting Jake's friends with a collective voice that demanded respect. The energy shifted, transforming fear into outrage. David felt a surge of pride as the crowd began to chant, "We stand together. No more fear." As the confrontation escalated, David stepped forward, raising his hands to calm the crowd. "Everyone, we can handle this without violence. Let's show them that we're stronger when we stand united." His voice rang out, echoing through the park. The crowd fell silent, eyes turning to David. Their expressions reflected the weight of his words, and he could feel the strength of their resolve. He turned back to Jake's friends, who now looked less confident, their bravado faltering in the face of unity. "Leave now, and don't come back. Lead." Slowly, Jake's friends retreated, the laughter replaced by sullen expressions. As they walked away, David felt a sense of triumph wash over him. The festival resumed, but the atmosphere had shifted. The crowd was more energized than ever, bonded by the experience they had just faced together. Families and friends shared stories, their laughter now more profound, their connections deeper. That evening, as the sun set behind the trees, David looked around and felt a sense of fulfillment. They had stood together against intimidation, and their resilience had brought them closer as a community. He knew that the battle with Jake was not over, but they had taken a significant step toward reclaiming their town. As the festival continued, David took a moment to reflect on how far they had come. This was no longer just about him. It was about everyone who had ever felt marginalized or bullied. Together, they would face the challenges ahead and create a community where respect and support reigned. As the festivities wound down and people began to leave, David felt a hand on his shoulder. Turning, he saw Sarah, her face glowing with pride. "You did it, David. You inspired everyone to stand up for what's right." "We did it," David corrected, his heart swelling with gratitude. "This is just the beginning." Together, they watched as the stars twinkled above them, a reminder that they were not alone in this fight. They would continue to shine light into the darkness and create a legacy of resilience and hope in Maplewood. In the days following the festival, the air in Maplewood buzzed with energy and anticipation. David couldn't shake the feeling that they had crossed a significant threshold. The community's rally against Jake and his friends had ignited something powerful, a newfound sense of solidarity among the residents. David knew that change was on the horizon, but he also understood that the battle was far from over. As he drove to work at the local hardware store, he reflected on how the festival had transformed from a simple gathering into a symbol of resistance. People were more aware of their surroundings, actively engaging in conversations about safety, respect, and community values. David felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was his chance to be part of something greater, to help shape the future of Maplewood. Background: the ripple effect. Over the next few weeks, the festival's success echoed throughout the town. David noticed an increase in the number of people attending community meetings. They were discussing not only safety but also the importance of inclusivity and respect among neighbors. David had become a local figurehead for change, and he embraced the role wholeheartedly. At the store, customers began to approach him, expressing their appreciation for his courage. "You really stood up for us, David," said Mrs. Jensen, an elderly woman who had lived in Maplewood for decades. It's about time someone spoke out. "Thank you, Mrs. Jensen. It's not just me. It's all of us," David replied, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Meanwhile, the conversation surrounding Jake began to shift. People were no longer whispering about the intimidation tactics he used. Instead, they were discussing how to confront and overcome those challenges together. David knew that empowering the community was essential in changing the narrative. Rising action. Community engagement. With Sarah's help, David organized a series of workshops focused on conflict resolution, communication skills, and community building. They invited speakers from nearby towns to share their experiences and strategies for maintaining unity and respect. The first workshop was a resounding success, with nearly 50 residents in attendance. "Today, we're going to discuss how to handle conflict in a constructive way," David announced as he stood before the group. "It's essential to communicate our feelings without escalating tensions. Together, we can create a community that listens, respects, and uplifts one another." As David spoke, he could see the eagerness in the attendees' eyes. The room buzzed with energy as residents engaged in discussions, shared their stories, and offered solutions. They exchanged contact information, eager to form connections that would strengthen their bonds. The workshop sparked a ripple effect in the community. Inspired by the positive momentum, residents organized cleanup events, neighborhood potlucks, and book clubs. They began to host regular meetings to discuss community issues and brainstorm ways to address them collectively. David's heart swelled with pride. Maplewood was becoming a beacon of hope and collaboration. Climax. A confrontation unfolds. Despite the community's growing unity, the shadow of Jake still loomed large. He had been quiet since the festival, but whispers circulated that he was plotting his comeback. Residents were anxious but determined not to let fear dictate their actions. One fateful Saturday, as David and Sarah prepared for another workshop, a commotion erupted outside the community center. David rushed to the door, his heart racing. He saw Jake standing on the sidewalk, flanked by a group of his friends, who wore expressions of disdain and defiance. "Look who it is, the so-called hero of Maplewood," Jake shouted, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "How's it feel to lead a bunch of sheep?" David stepped forward, his jaw clenched. "We're not afraid of you anymore, Jake. You may have tried to intimidate us, but you only made us stronger." "Stronger?" Jake scoffed. "You think a few workshops will change anything? You're all just a bunch of weaklings hiding behind each other. You don't know how to stand up for yourselves." Before David could respond, the crowd that had gathered behind him began to murmur in anger. "Leave us alone, Jake," someone shouted from the back. "We're not afraid of you." Jake's expression shifted from confidence to frustration. He realized that his intimidation tactics were failing, and he was losing control. Fallout. The community unites. The crowd began to chant, "We stand together. We stand together." The power of unity washed over David like a wave. He felt a surge of adrenaline, knowing that this was the moment they had all been waiting for. "Jake, you're welcome to join us if you choose to be part of our community," David called out, his voice steady. "But if you continue to spread fear and hate, you will find no support here. We're moving forward, with or without you." Jake hesitated, his bravado faltering. He looked at the faces in the crowd, neighbors he had grown up with, people who had once feared him. For a brief moment, doubt flickered in his eyes. But instead of acknowledging their strength, he turned on his heel and stormed away, retreating into the shadows. The crowd erupted into applause, relief and triumph filling the air. David turned to the group, overwhelmed with emotion. "We did it. This is what community looks like." Sarah beamed at him, her eyes sparkling with pride. "You stood your ground, David. We all did. This is just the beginning." Reflection. A change of heart. As the dust settled and the crowd dispersed, David found himself reflecting on the power of community. The confrontation had solidified their resolve to stand together against any adversity they faced. The unity they had fostered went beyond mere words. It was a deep-rooted commitment to support one another and create a safe environment for everyone. In the following weeks, David noticed a shift in the atmosphere around town. People were more engaged, smiling at each other in the streets and stopping for friendly conversations. The local businesses thrived as community members actively supported one another, reinforcing the idea that unity breeds success. One afternoon, David received an unexpected phone call. It was Jake's mother, a longtime resident of Maplewood. "David, I hope you'll hear me out," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm worried about my son. He's been acting differently since the festival, and I think he's struggling. Can you help?" David's heart softened. "Of course, Mrs. Thompson. I'd be happy to talk with him. Let's see if we can bring him back into the fold." In the weeks that followed, David met with Jake several times. It wasn't easy. Jake was defensive and resistant, but David remained patient and empathetic. He encouraged Jake to share his feelings, acknowledging the pain and frustration he had experienced. Gradually, Jake began to open up, revealing insecurities and fears that had fueled his anger and need for control. One day, as they sat on a park bench, Jake finally admitted, "I never wanted to be the villain. I just didn't know how to fit in. I felt like I was losing everything." David nodded, understanding that the journey to healing would take time. "You're not alone, Jake. Everyone struggles, but it's how we handle those struggles that defines us. You have a chance to change the narrative." Over time, Jake began to attend community meetings, participating in discussions about inclusivity and respect. With David's support, he slowly transformed from an antagonist into a contributing member of the community. The residents of Maplewood welcomed him back, showcasing the power of forgiveness and understanding. As David looked around at the thriving community they had built together, he couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. The challenges they faced had only strengthened their resolve, creating a legacy that would last for generations. Maplewood became a model for other towns, a shining example of how communities could come together to rise above adversity. David and Sarah continued to organize workshops and events, ensuring that the spirit of unity would endure. In the end, the story of Maplewood was one of resilience, transformation, and hope. David understood that while the journey had its challenges, the bonds forged through compassion and understanding would guide them into a brighter future. As David gazed at the vibrant sunset over the park, he knew that their story was far from over. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where every voice mattered and every person had a place. He turned to Sarah, a smile spreading across his face. "We've only just begun. Together, we can build a legacy that stands the test of time."